Hello, and welcome to episode 35 of ChatDPS, where this week we delve into the CrowdStrike 2025 Threat Hunting Report. And then we look at comments reported in the Fin Review by veteran venture capitalist and former senior Microsoft executive, Daniel Petre, who warned that big technology companies cannot be trusted to build artificial intelligence without laws forcing them to do so or do the right thing. Look, let's get straight into this one. Key insights from the CrowdStrike 2025 Threat Hunting Report caught all of our eyes this week because there were a few things in their motherhood statements and so on and so forth. But there were indeed some interesting things that were on trend with us, certainly. So drawing on data from the 24-25 report showcases how adversaries are becoming more sophisticated, scalable, and business-like in their operations. The report considers emerging technologies such as generative AI or GenAI for those who like the shortened versions, and how they're exploiting and bypassing traditional defenses. Which is obviously where we've been up to for quite considerable time now. A common thread informing how different laws set the legal standard of care is by reference to evolving threats and the state-of-the-art defenses to counter them. The report suggests lawyers must keep up to date with the evolving threat landscape. So I think you've been keeping everybody up to date, Robert, on that. And a new breed of threat actor, the enterprising adversary. So CrowdStrike identifies a shift towards adversaries who operate with strategic precision and business-like efficiency. These actors, whether nation, state, or e-crime, are increasingly bypassing legacy security tools by exploiting human vulnerabilities through social engineering and vishing, which has been reported as the root cause for some of the most widely reported attacks on the UK retail sector. Vishing is a type of cyber attack where adversaries use phone calls to trick victims into revealing sensitive information, targeting unmanaged devices and cloud environments, and then using AI to generate and enhance phishing, entity spoofing, and malware developments. And then there's the last piece that was kind of an interesting piece, which was threats by numbers. Interactive intrusions, hands-on keyboard attack, rose 27% year on year. 81% of these intrusions were malware-free, reflecting a shift towards stealthier, harder to detect techniques. Cloud intrusions surged 136% in the first half of 2025 compared to 24. That's a good point of contact and communication around that. Vishing attacks increased 442% from the first to the second half of 2024, and the number of vishing attacks in the first half of 25 have already exceeded the total number seen in 24. So e-crime activity accounted for 73% of all interactive intrusions. So what they then go in to say is who's actually being targeted. But I think in the first instance, what I'd like to do is to step over and say, Robert, can we begin with you about some of this stuff? Because right down to the bottom of it, there are some interesting points that are being made here. But the fact of the matter is they're asking people to actually understand their governance discussions. Yeah.
Yeah. So if we look at it from a legal and governance perspective, so because I think it said, lawyers should be on top of this. Well, so should everybody who's a senior executive or advisor to these organizations. Because you need to be on top of the latest trends and see where these threat actors are targeting. If we look at Australia, we've introduced ransomware reporting, so that needs to be something that organizations need to be on top of and need to have processes and procedures in place for ransomware reporting now. We've talked previously about the increase to the penalties under the Privacy Act, and we'll see if any further changes come through either under the Privacy Act or the Cybersecurity Act. So there's things to keep on abreast of in terms of legislation. I think in other jurisdictions, particularly in Europe, I think directors and officers have more direct personal liability under legislation in the EU. So they have to, I think, take greater care in terms of governance. So thinking about governance, yeah. So again, it comes down to are you keeping up to date in terms of your risk assessments of what these particular threats are? So these threats are ever changing, as we've seen. Vishing is now a big thing. So what's vishing all about? Some of the big examples seem to be out of North Korea, pretending to be somebody who they're not, and getting jobs. Particularly, seems to be a lot of jobs in the US, and using VPNs to show that they're from somewhere else, remoting in, and working for these companies. And once they're in, then they're able to work with whatever e-crime gang it might be to then start to move within that in that network, grab credentials, move around, exfiltrate, do whatever they do. So in that sense, the reaction from a governance point of view, from a risk point of view, should be, okay, well, what do we need to do to make sure that whoever we're interviewing is who they say they are, and how do we improve the way we identify those individuals? And obviously, there's things you can do to do better checks in terms of identity. So you need to introduce that into your risk management framework, into your governance processes and procedures. So these are the things you should be doing on a regular basis, every few months, at least annually, looking at what these threats are, and then pivoting to make sure that your technology, your processes, your training of your people is up to scratch to actually push back and mitigate against these risks.
Yeah, Adam, you had some comments around this as well, didn't you?
Yeah, interesting thing. A lot of people will say that they hide who they are and work in a company, but you would know if they're a threat actor. We're going to talk a little bit more about AI later, but they're utilizing an awful lot of AI tools to look like someone else, sound like someone else in real time through calls. So it can be any face with any voice that goes through, and usually they sit in the company for like 6 to 8 months before they start to do anything nefarious, doing the actual job. So it really does bring in what's going on. The big thing that we need to remember is these crime syndicates that are doing this. It is a business for them. It's a profit center. And everything that they do, you were speaking about before, looking like a business, they are quicker at changing the business model. And in some cases, their business model is something that businesses should use in future to make them more profitable and do better. So it's we're in a really weird phase where the criminals are starting to lead, and we need to get that back somehow.
Yeah, I think I tend to agree with everything that's been said here. I mean, and especially the points around, sort of executives making themselves more aware of what's going on. I think the ongoing training, the fact that if you're not talking about this in your town hall meetings every week, is trying to sort of like highlight what's going on and to educate the staff. I mean, then you're asking for trouble, really, because they change the perspectives on this pretty much every week. Something works and then they change it, and then all of a sudden you're into something else, and you're thinking it's because it's become known, I guess. So things are happening rapidly. So the only constant in life is change, and if you're not actually up to speed with that, then there's a problem, right?
Sure is.
Yeah. So, okay, moving into the next item I was kind of interested by this because it's been a part of the conversation that we've been having over the last several weeks now. And this is from a man that knows. Yeah. So TechCrowd can't be trusted to regulate themselves on AI. And this is from Daniel Petre. So Daniel Petre he used to be an executive on Microsoft. And he's also a venture capitalist. This is a guy that knows what he's talking about. So he said it's fair to suggest government in Australia, this is my thoughts around this. It's fair to suggest that government in Australia remains split about whether the new AI specific laws are required to cover issues such as employment, ethical development, data privacy, and copyright protection, or whether AI growth should proceed within existing laws to encourage commercial and productivity gains. Clearly, there's a big think tank that's happening this week here in Australia looking at productivity specifically. And if they're not talking about this as part of that, then I think that there's going to be a challenge to the outcomes. So this was a really well-balanced article that was put out in the Fin Review, and it took both sides of the debate and it sort of like mashed it all together, and it sort of, it really made you kind of take, let's go for the Wild West and let's go for the lockdown, old Eastern Bloc, kind of debate, and that was really good. Petre, however, said that AI regulation was a more nuanced picture than both the tech crowd and those concerned observers made out. And he said that legislative review and potential changes would be needed. Areas such as data privacy and copyright were not well understood enough by lawmakers in the context of large AI models to be allowed to proceed unhindered. Comparisons to the agricultural revolution were drawn specifically regarding retraining. Moving from a manual or horse-drawn plow to the use of machinery was a simple yet effective example that was used. And I quote here now, look at how tech companies have performed when it comes to the clear damage social media has done to adolescents and how reluctant tech companies are in the face of very clear harm to do something to alleviate that harm. Now then, that's something that would be quite close to the heart of this government, surely. They've just put some legislation together. Adam, morals, ethics, we're very big on all of that kind of stuff as part of the debate within this group. Your take on this? What was your take on this Fin Review article?
Yeah, so there's two major points here that I think is really important. The first, which was quite interesting, was the take on social media. And this could absolutely be a social media 2.0, where we're putting people in harm, putting their privacy at risk because of, without having some guardrails and just some ethical pointers as to what kind of data can be used, should be used, is stored, and the way in which it's used. We could end up exposing all kinds of different people, and it's quite a worry. Like from a security perspective, social media is how you do your open source intelligence on who your victim is going to be, right? Whether it's LinkedIn or Facebook or any of the others. The second one, and I think probably the most important part, is from an executive perspective. They don't care at all about like what your AI model is or anything else. They just care about the risk that it brings into their business. So if you've got an unregulated AI cybersecurity tool, for example, does that mean that it's going to make even more vulnerabilities and increase your risk to breach? If you're utilizing it as a front end for a whole bunch of your data, are you exposing that to people that it shouldn't be at? And those are the questions that are happening at the moment, especially in the boardroom, around what we're going to use strategically from a GenAI perspective. And these are the pieces that we really need to work with government to put in smart legislation for these, because I agree it's nuanced and there's areas where it's very, very important, areas where it's less important. But we really have to get on top of this and not be in the situation we're in today with social media again.
Yeah,
that would be worst case scenario.
I think the thing here, Robert, it comes back to the point that you've made before around the fact that we want people to be participating, but at the same time, we've got to pick a bloody lane in terms of what we're doing, right? I mean, this is where it's coming back to, right?
Yeah, that's right. And I think it's probably worth just adding the context of this discussion we've been having over a number of weeks. So I think we probably started with America's AI action plan, which is all, big guns blazing. Then we talked about Scott Farquhar and his talk to the press club, and that was very much around pick your lane, and he was suggesting the lane should be data centers and becoming the hub for Southeast Asia and kind of building around that. And then we had the Productivity Commission come out and they threw a spanner in the works around privacy and suggested a two-track model right at the last minute. So that was kind of interesting. But they also talked about sort of light touch or no touch regulation when it comes to AI, get out of the way. And then in this article, what's quite good is that you get some balance from Mr. Petre, but also you get the views of a couple of AI companies also saying get out of the way because it's going to slow us down if we get regulated. So I think what's good is that balance. months. And I think the social media example is good. And it's good because I think Mr. Petre's right about the fact that these platforms, these social media platforms, haven't been doing enough. They understand what the social harm is. This is like smoking of the 1950s. It's like they know what the problem is, but they don't want to do anything about it unless they're forced to. And so. Of course, the government comes along with the Online Safety Act, which is we should talk more about that later on in the year, because that comes into effect at the end of this year. But of course, the government's come along, and as they tend to do, they use a sledgehammer to deal with this particular nut of an issue, and that's often the problem is that the tech companies, the platforms are not able to self-regulate themselves properly. Government comes along with the sledgehammer, and in this case, with the Online Safety Act, it's a sledgehammer with no real solutions. So a lot of this is all around how you're going to verify people's identity to prove that they're under 16 or whatever it might be. And there's no sort of one tool that's being prescribed, fair enough. But there's all sorts of doubts about what solutions are going to be implemented. Are they going to work? But the government kind of gets out of the way and says, well, you go figure it out. We've just come with our sledgehammer and you can go pick up the pieces. So there is that element. But I come back to, I think, what I mentioned maybe last week, which is, do people not remember Robo-Debt? There was only a couple of years ago where we had that royal inquiry, and that was a complete disaster, absolutely devastated people's lives. And this is all kind of linked. So it was, that was an automated decision-making process where clearly not enough humans were in the loop in terms of the design. They didn't understand the logic of the algorithm they were using. Where are people going, oh yes, Robo-Debt, that was really terrible, we don't want to make those mistakes again? I'm not hearing that. So again, it's nuanced, it's all about balance. And like, coming back to your point, let's pick a lane, let's decide where we want to lead within Australia. If it's data centers, if it's something else, let's pick those lanes, and then let's come up with balanced legislation. I'm being very optimistic here because I know the government won't do this, but let's try and come up with some balanced legislation, which is actually tailored to where we want to take Australia as in that AI sector going forward, and then taking into consideration copyright and privacy and all those sorts of things in a balanced, measured way, not at the behest of the tech giants or the lobbyists or anything like that, but what's best for the country. That's where we want to get to. I mean, again, that's very optimistic, probably won't get there, but I think we have to have that discussion, and we have to hear from all sides. Can't just hear from the tech bros.
Any closing thoughts, Adam? Yeah. Yeah, and how do we secure that? I mean, I think is the biggest thing from where I sit. Obviously, self-interest being right at the forefront of everything. But look, guys, thanks very much indeed for being available. I understand that everyone's time is stressed this week, but thank you so much for joining us. That was ChatDPS, episode 35, and we're well on the way to being up and running for a year. So we'll celebrate that milestone when we get there. Thanks very much indeed for coming on.
Thank you.